Hi there, my name's Steve and I'm the Service Centre Manager here at Wheels Only. Today we're doing a short video just to tell you about the Shimano Safety Inspection recall that's been going on. It's been out a little while now, but we're still getting a few inquiries, so we thought we would just do a short video to explain exactly the process. So it is important to say that this is a safety inspection, it's not a full recall. There has been a bit of confusion. There'll be a production code printed on the back of the crank arm, both on the left hand and the right hand side, which we'll link to at the bottom of this video. So the production code that will be printed on the back of the crank will be towards the back of where the pedal actually gets attached. The code will be 2 letters. The letter just signifies the year and the month that the crank was manufactured in. So we're doing these inspections in-house. They are taking approximately 30 to 45 minutes. You can either bring the whole bike in with the crank on, or if you've already got an affected crank that you've had removed at any point, just bring the crank in and we'll get that sorted for you. And if you do book in to have a crank inspection whilst you wait, we'll also provide you with complimentary coffee, and feel free to have a look around the store. It has caused a little bit of confusion to exactly which cranksets are covered by this safety inspection notice. It's important to note it's only Ultegra and it is only DURA-ACE. So what we'll do now is we'll run through a couple of cranks that have been found to have been affected by this fault, sort of things that we're looking out for, we can show you. And then what we'll do next is we'll hand you over to Nigel. He's the person who's been doing the majority of these inspections, and we'll be able to go through an inspection just to show you exactly what's involved. So this is an Ultegra crank which was brought into us off the bike, which was found to already be cracked. Okay, the crack runs across and it also runs up and down the crank arm. This one's really obvious to find. It wouldn't take us long to find this if your bike comes in with this particular fault. Okay, so this Ultegra crank here that came to us, this one was just displaying some noises when we were testing it outside the bike, and its fault wasn't immediately obvious. However, once we got the chain rings off, we could see that the crank arm was starting to separate. So from our experience, something that all of these failures so far have had in common is they've all been accompanied with a difficult to diagnose or hard to track down noise. So if you do have a strange noise and you've tried to solve it, that may be an indication that you do have an issue with your crank. With all of this in mind, it is important to note that the vast majority of these cranks have not been affected. They may be involved in the date of production for the recall, but the actual failure rate is still very low. Officially, it's around 0.5%. So if the crank is deemed to require replacement, Shimano will replace them free of charge. What they're replacing them with, though, will not be exactly the same as what you sent in. They're being replaced with a modern 12-speed crank, which is made in a different way, but they will have 11-speed chainrings. With this in mind, the crank may look slightly different, however, it will still come from the same series. So if you send in a DURA-ACE, you'll get a DURA-ACE. If you send in an Ultegra, you'll get an Ultegra. The inspection itself involves the removal of the crank from the bike and then the removal of the chainrings from the crank arm. We then perform a thorough cleaning of the crank. This is done just in a neutral detergent. We're not putting it through a parts washer or using any solvents. Once the crank is clean, we're then inspecting the seams of the HOLLOWTECH, which are around the edges and down the sides of the crank arms themselves. We're looking for any signs of separation, any signs of delamination, or any cracks that may have formed in the crank. Now we've been through the basics of the crank inspection, I'm going to hand you over to Nigel, who's going to carry out a mock inspection the way he does it when you bring your cranks or bike in.
Step number 1 of your crank inspection will be to remove the crank from the bike. Once the crankset is removed from the bike, we are then going to go ahead to remove the chain. And the next step will be to clean our crank. What we're doing, we're checking all around where the rings would attach, as that is one of the main spots that they will become unbonded if they do. Wipe it down just so we can make sure we're not missing any key bits. We can clearly see the crank has become unbonded from its main shell. There is also a defect further down the arm, so that is what we would class as a failed crank inspection. This was clearly a failed crank, but if this was one that had passed inspection, this is the carry on of the process of what we would then do. We are going to reattach both of your rings, torqued back up to manufacturer's settings, which is 12 to 16 on the rings. 2 pinch bolts on the crank arm are going to go up to 12 to 14, and the end cap is 0.7 to 1.2.
Cheers, Nigel. Appreciate that, doing all the work as usual.
All good, man.
So hopefully that's helped clarify the crank inspection process. We'll put a link in the comments below which will lead you to the affected crank codes, which will help you identify if your cranks are covered by this inspection. However, if you are unsure, give us a call and we'll let you know. So if you need to get yourself booked in for an inspection, give us a call, option 2 for the workshop, and we'll get you booked into the next available slot. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Hopefully it's cleared up the process, and we'll see you soon.